Slot this morning, we're asking a really important question. How do we know that what we have in the Bible is the same as what the authors wrote? Well, of course, it isn't. The Bible writers wrote in Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic, and we read the Bible in English. But I want to leave aside the question of translation this morning and focus on this question. Do we have what was originally written by those Bible writers in Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic? I think we do. And I want to show you this morning with a little experiment. A few weeks ago, I asked John to write a short, silly piece of text. In fact, it was 78 words long. It was copied twice. And those copies were passed to other people and copied again. And those copies were all passed to somebody else and copied a third time. I was then given only the copies of the copies of the copies. Lots of copying, of course, over time means lots of space for mistakes to creep in, just like the copying of the Bible. Though, of course, the Bible was generally copied by professionals, thousands of them, rather than by us in the church family. Now, here's the question. Could I use the 18 copies that I was given to recreate what John originally wrote? Well, in 78 words, I counted 60 differences between those 18 texts. No two texts were exactly alike, so that presents a challenge, doesn't it? How do you cut through those differences to find the real text? Many of those differences were to do with punctuation, whether commas were included, where the line breaks might appear. Others were spelling differences. The word biscuit is quite hard to spell, for example, and a few people struggled with that. In one case, there was a different verb, but that was obvious because the other 17 texts all agreed with each other. One missed a sentence because it came between two identical words. The writer had skipped the bit in between and then just carried on. And that sometimes happened in copying the Bible too. But it's obvious because all the other copies agreed with one another. Sometimes copies seem to come in groups, at 4 or 5 pages with a similar set of differences, which suggested a sort of a common ancestor, perhaps a version that all the others copied together. In fact, only 2 differences in the text caused me any challenge at all because the copies were split fairly evenly between the 2 options, suggesting perhaps that the differences had started right back with those first 2 copies, and everything else that followed, copied pretty clearly, would have been copied there. One difference was here. Was it the word 10 or the number 10? I tend to prefer word. I think that's probably original, but we'll find out shortly. The other was a choice between the words invented, invited, and wanted. They were fairly evenly split. I think invited makes not a great deal of sense of the text, and so I've gone for invented. I think that makes the most sense, and there are good reasons for trusting that version, because actually one or two of the most problematic texts that made the least sense both had the word invented, which suggests that was original and they'd copied that pretty well. Now, if this was in the Bible, and it isn't, but if it was, I'd probably mention this bit in a footnote down the bottom that just told you that I'd made a decision for invented, but some of the text said wanted. You'd know that I'd had to make a difficult decision at that point. But the point I want to make here is this. None of the differences that we found in all of those 18 copies, all of the 60 differences, really materially changed the meaning of the text. We can be confident that we've reconstructed the original 78 words, and John can tell you whether this is what he originally wrote. But of course, the more pages we have, and we have thousands of pages of the Bible, the more certain we can be as we choose between texts to be completely clear that we have what the Bible writers originally wrote?
Ash, that was really interesting. I loved watching. I watched it last night, and what I really wanted to know, and I'm sure everybody else watching wants to know as well, is what actually did you come up with when you put all of these these fragments together?
Can I read it for you?
Yeah, go on.
Okay.
And I'll tell you how well you did.
Once upon a time, there was a biscuit called Cameron. Cameron was a caramel biscuit. He invented a recipe for beef burgers. The main ingredient wasn't beef because biscuits, as everyone knows, don't eat beef. The main ingredient was blueberries. They were mashed together with flour and icing sugar and then fried in a large pan for 10 minutes. Sadly, while Cameron the caramel biscuit was frying his first batch of blueberry beef burgers, he melted. And that was that.
Well, I think that says more about my weird brain than anything else, doesn't it?
Yep.
Now, thanks. So, you told us yesterday that it was 78 words. You were absolutely bang on with that. It is 78 words. And you said that there were issues with different sentences being missed out sometimes, and optional words and punctuation differences. And you did pretty well on those. You were right about 10 being written in words.
Yep.
The other words what was the other word you weren't quite sure on? Invented.
Or wanted.
Yeah, you were right with invented. That was correct. I screenshotted the picture last night. I blew it up so I could see it with my dodgy eyes. And there was one mistake.
Really?
One mistake.
Okay, which was what?
You put a comma after once upon a time. I didn't.
Okay.
Now, I know that grammatically I should have done. So that was a grammatical mistake that you corrected in my original writing. So thank you very much. It's very helpful.
So I think there were five people who put the comma in there. So I'd assume that therefore it was original and other people had missed it out.
There was not a comma.
I don't think
but there should have been.
Makes a massive difference though, does it?
It doesn't make a difference to the meaning of the text whatsoever. The meaning of the text is clearly bonkers here. But we can't say the same thing about the Bible. The Bible's absolutely true. And it's great to have the confidence in knowing that that there are all of these fragments all over that, just like you've done here, people have been able to put together and come up with what it actually said.